All right, welcome back to another episode of the 100% Wildcat. This never happens to me. I can't talk today.
It's Mark.
You know what? The 100% Wild Podcast. We are here with two people that are much better at talking than I am, Matt and Mark Drury. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Yeah, we've gone through a few podcasts this morning, as most people know. We filmed several at a time,
Yep.
And we've had some good guests. But it's always nice to have Uncle Mark sit in on the podcast with us because I can't think of anybody that knows more, at least that I know, about whitetails than this guy.
You got it. You got it all, Mark.
I've really become the guest that comes in when no one else can come.
That's right.
I really used to feel honored to do these. Now I just feel like,
You're really
afterthought.
You're pretty much just a co-host.
Yeah, that's why. Right?
We do appreciate you being here, though.
Yeah,
and
glad to be here, man.
we're talking about a lot of different things today with all these different people, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to catch up with you about what's happening right now for us. You know, it's the summer, mid-July while we're actually recording this. And I know I've been doing a ton of work. I'm sure you're busy in the woods as much as you can get out of the office. And I'd be really interested to hear what's new with you in the whitetail woods. What kind of stuff's going on right now, Mark?
Well, it's what's not going on, which is rain. We're really dry in Iowa. I have a weather app on my phone called Climate Field View, and it kind of estimates your rain per event. And my Texas lease is the place where I've received the most rain out of like 15 different fields. That area is wetter than we are in the Midwest.
Jeez.
So, in my opinion, we're as dry as we were in 2012, which everybody knows what happened that year. So, I'm very, very worried right now. Every time I've seen it this dry through the years, we end up with some sort of a die-off from EHD. It just depends on how deep that die-off's going to cut.
And
this
honestly, you were calling this for months now. It's been months that you said.
You hear me complaining about it.
Yeah. It's like it's going to be, we're going to have, it was even through the winter last year.
We were dry. Not a lot of snow,
and you were like, this is not setting up for a good.
It's not.
And then it was warm early this year in the spring. Really, February was starting to get warm in March.
And I started complaining about it again then, and we went into the spring dry.
Yeah.
We were fairly wet in April, but then from May 20th through July the 3rd, I received 0.9 on my main Iowa farm. So I received less than an inch in 43 days.
And it's weird because
which is that you can't sustain.
There are areas there that have had record rainfall.
For sure.
We had some flooding this spring, and we had. I'm trying to think. Rod Owen was just on, and he was talking about his area, and they've had good rainfall. So it's weird how those pockets go on the map, right?
It's pockety, which is why that EHD ends up pockety.
Yeah.
And it appears as if my little area there is in the pocket this year. But now it could turn around, it could start raining, and all the problems would be solved. But it does explain why EHD is so very pockety, because thunderstorms, by their very nature in the summer, they're pop-ups and they're pockety. Not everybody gets consistent rainfall. So that's why even last year we saw big die-offs over in Illinois. And I had the best crop I'd ever had because I got an inch every 10 days. It was amazing last year, but this year we're paying for it.
So is there anything you are doing to try to proactively
handle
the situation?
And even during the winter, I fed more analogics this winter, hoping to kind of give my deer an immune system boost going into the summer than I ever have. I fed more than I ever have. And I'm feeding again heavily now that we're into the dry time to try and give that immune system the boost, which, it's not going to go in and prevent EHD. And there's some feeds out there now saying that they can prevent it. They can't. It's a virus. You can't check a virus in a petri dish, right? You can't kill it. So, you have to do everything you can, though, to help their immune system fight off the secondary stuff that comes from EHD. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. And I actually put out 52 50-gallon water stations as well, in a theory that I concocted with David Lindsay and Grant Woods. If we can potentially keep them off of the muddy areas, maybe it would help. But trying to keep those full is a pain, and there's algae growing in them within a week, so it may not be the best solution either, but we're at least trying that in the short term. We've had them out now about 2 weeks, and this would be the second watering right now.
So the logic is, right, these midges that transmit EHD, they're found in these mud flats around the drying off.
Keep away from the mud.
So keep them away from the mud flats.
So
that
I
makes
would
sense.
assume the hard part is to get a deer, their mentality, their whole life going to one spot, to switch it and go to a tub, right?
For sure.
Yeah,
we actually added a substance to the water called blue light, which is a stress reliever. It's kind of like Gatorade for ruminants, The guys up at Analogics, they have another whole side of their business, which is vet science, and they were like, hey, add blue light to your water because stressed pigs and cows, they really crave this stuff when they're stressed. So we added the blue light in hopes that they would take to it a little quicker, but usage doesn't seem to be very, very aggressive just yet. No. So,
did you put any cameras on those?
We have cameras on them, but I haven't really checked them. So thus far, I'm lukewarm on this theory just because they're not coming to it with regularity. They heat up real quick because they're not underground, and so. Without a full-time watering system throughout the farm, I don't think I can make this theory work, even though the theory makes sense, to your point.
On small enough properties, you probably could be
help.
Pretty effective, but
could help, but
the size you're talking about,
it's difficult. It's challenging.
Yeah.
It's 2,500 gallons a week is what we're trying to put out there, but it's warm within 24 hours.
So as we sit here today, July 10th, the day we're filming here, have you started putting out cameras yet? I mean, what's your...
I have just a few out on a new feed that we're testing with Analogics, the same one you've got on your lease.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot out. I generally use about the 15th to the 20th of July as the starting gun for putting cameras out.
Yeah.
By then the deer are about finished, and really your best pictures always occur in the first 2 weeks of August. I've noticed that.
So once you put them out, about how long do you wait till you go back in there?
Usually a month.
A month.
Yeah, I'll put them out in mid-July, and then I wait till mid-August to check them. Yeah.
What's your typical summer trail camera placement looking like? Are you thinking through the same... I mean, there's a lot of different things that we're thinking about when we're placing cameras during the season. Mm-hmm. Is it the same type of stuff you're thinking about, just a slightly different location, or is it dramatically different strategy?
Well, this summer I'm going to put a bunch over water because of the fact that it is so dry. I also have really good luck on big hub scrapes, and I think we've talked about this before. Summer scrape monitoring is very, very good. And I marked a bunch of scrapes last winter that I can't wait to go put cameras on this summer because they're generally, you don't see them in the summer, right? They look like everything else, but they're there and they're still going to work those limbs. They're not going to paw the ground, but they'll still come check them. And I get a lot of really big deer on those. The other place that I have a lot of luck on is either a mineral block from Analogics or a bio rock from Biologic. I love that bio rock and the mineral block. They both do very well.
Yep. So it's basically just some kind of trace mineral type stuff, right?
Well, the bio rock is predominantly salt, but it's a natural salt mine from, I believe, Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of two places you can get salt in its natural form like they have it. And then the mineral block, it's got a lot of the goodies that Analogics has in it.
Supplement 365.
The Supplement 365.
Didn't they make something that you can pour on top of that now?
I think they do.
I'm gonna put some of that out this week and try it.
I think they do. But I think the mineral block differs from the protein block in that it doesn't have everything that the Sup 365 has in it. It's more mineral based.
Okay. The protein block has the Sup 365.
A lot of it, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. We were talking, me and Matt, before we recorded today, that in Michigan you can't put out bait or minerals or anything until during the season, actually. So,
wow. How about it?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been trying
been
trying some different ways to try to get some better summer inventory. And an idea I've heard from a number of people I've talked to, and I don't know if you've heard about this at all, but using a preorbital scent. So a glandular scent from the preorbital glands up here that deer are typically getting on licking branches, and a lot of guys are using this in the summer even just
to get
like
pictures.
You said. Yep, these
and
bucks
having
are
good
still
luck with it?
They're having very good luck with it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because like you said, they're still visiting those scrapes. They're just not digging them up, but they check the licking branch, and when this preorbital scent is there, supposedly it brings in many more bucks from the area to come check that out.
They're very social, and they're social more through scent than anything else, scent and visual. But they're very social animals, so I don't doubt that at all. It makes a lot of sense.
So we'll see. I've got some cameras out, and we'll see if it's different than what I would usually expect. But otherwise, if you can't put food out, and if you don't have some kind of summer food or isolated water source. It can be a little bit tricky in the summer to get good inventory. I mean, is there anything else you would do to try to get eyes on a buck this time of year other than one of those?
Stay out from your camera. That intrusion is always your number one enemy. So put it out and stay out. That's the main thing. Don't go check it or use one of the cell systems that are out there. But those I've found to be unreliable for the most part. The picture quality isn't great, and you got to have good service and all that good stuff. So I'm the old-fashioned, just put the camera out, let it sit, and check it later.
So if you're in a state like that where you can't bait or anything like that or supplement feed, what are you honing in on? Traditional scrape sites or
for sure.
or patterning them where they're going from food to bed, or where are you hanging a set? Hanging
in terms of the early season?
Well, in terms of summer, trying to get those, get that inventory.
Yeah, no doubt it would be based on something that I learned the previous season during the early season that I want to get in there, or it might be 2 years ago based on crop rotation. A lot of times the stuff you learn one year won't come back around because of crop switching out. It was beans, then it was corn, now it's beans again. So sometimes you're 2 years in advance. So I'm going to make plans, for that based on information I've learned in the past. So,
is there anything like this summer right now, Mark, that you're implementing something like that? You've learned something over the years, and now it's the summer before the season. All right, I need to make this change to my property or to one of my setups.
For sure.
Any examples you can share like that?
It's often has to do with access or stand location. I'm going to tweak it because it really didn't work last year, or my access, I kept getting, seen or heard, or I was blowing deer out. So I'll either erase that, or I might have a tree stand set that I'm going to replace with a box blind because I kept getting picked visually, those types of things. So I'm always tweaking based on mistakes. And if you can eliminate enough mistakes, you start getting better and better at not spooking deer when they're in and around you. So my off-season plan is almost always revolving around eliminating things that went wrong the previous year. Almost always.
How many spots like that do you think you have this year even? I mean, how many stands you're going to move or blinds you're going to move or anything like
that? 6 new spots because of new farms, and then tweaking 3 or 4 probably, something like that.
But it's also been years and years in the making. I mean, once you've tweaked a spot, you usually don't go back in.
A lot of them, they're where they need to be. Yeah. So a lot of these farms that I'm hunting right now, I've had for 7, 8, 9 years. So they're pretty much tweaked. It's been interesting. I bought a couple farms in the off season, a 120-acre parcel and a 97-acre parcel in Missouri. So a lot of my attention has gone to those 2 parcels, and that's been a really fun project. We've documented it all with drones and cameras and all that stuff, and we're actually putting together a piece for DoD TV that'll come out sometime here this summer or this fall about those 2 pieces, and we'll keep updating people as well as our, from success there.
Well, that's the fun part, because you really haven't had a new piece for
a
few
time.
Years to all these. It's not theories anymore. They're working, it's working things that you've done little bit by little bit, but to go in and have a new piece to completely overhaul.
For sure.
I'm sure it's been
It's been exciting. I mean, that's fun for me. It's a blank chalkboard when you start.
Yeah.
So you get to go in there and make all these changes, and I think of the decisions I make now versus the ones I used to make. Well, when I was in my mid-20s, I would have dove in there, and wherever the heaviest trail was, I'd have hung a stand, and I would have got on the correct wind side of it. And anymore, I don't even hardly visit those deep drainages where the trails are most defined. I'm up on the ridges and away from the cover, and I'm trying to pull them out of the cover and stuff. And it's all about access and food and not disturbing that deer herd. So it's going to be fun to see what if we can take a deer off of each one. That's the goal going into the year. Mature buck off of each of those 2 farms, which is a tough task.
Do you think it's going to be an early like your current Missouri farm that you've had for the last few years? You've always had an early season success as soon as Missouri's season starts. Are these new farms going to be kind of that mentality, or are you thinking that one might be a rut farm, one might be late season?
I think it's too early to tell and give that decision today. My gut tells me that the 120, because it is such a heavy cover farm, that it's going to be better late season. But we're going to have cameras running all summer to see. There should be a shooter or 2 in there, I think. And if so, I'll have a crop to try and take him in an early part of September. I've already got 2 big clover fields planted in it. And then inside those clover fields, we're going to come out and carve a radish field out to try and hopefully have some deer in there this summer, and then pull them to the radishes for an actual bow shot. The other farm, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's going to be a great rut farm just because of the way it sets up. And there is one bottom field that should hold a shooter, but I just won't know till I run those cameras. I really won't.
Can you? I'm really curious how you pick these farms. Like when Mark Drury is looking for a new spot, what are the things you're thinking about when making that decision that this is the spot worth investing in? Why did you pick these two farms?
Both of them have a lot of south face, which I love in a farm. I think ultimately a farm is made or broke based on how much south face it holds. You also have to have water, and you got to have cover, and then you can add the food in almost any equation. So I never worry about food source. In fact, both of them don't have any food source anywhere close. They're both kind of pastury farms. So therefore, we go in and add our food plots. I think they're going to draw in a lot of deer. So I looked at that as a benefit. Even though these didn't have any, the neighboring farms didn't have a lot. So therefore, when we add it, we could become the food source in the neighborhood. So I like that. But both have a lot of south face and a lot of thick cover. I like thick cover because you just can't create that. You can add water by building ponds. You can add food, and you can come up with the right access and whatnot, but you can't create south face and you can't create heavy cover. You can't do it.
Can you elaborate on why you care so much about the south-facing slopes?
It's where your heavy cover is, and that's where they bed. 90% of the time a deer's bedding during the rut, often they're on a south to east face.
And this is because it's getting more sunlight?
More
that's
sunlight,
why there's more cover?
Warmer, and often it's the most thick cover that'll be in any area as well. Go to the north side of the hill, look at the trees there, and then go to the south side and look at the difference in the cover and the thickness. The north side of the trees, they're trying to grow up and straight and reach the sunlight. And the south side, there's plenty of sunlight, so everything's thick,
Right.
So if you go in and you want to create more cover on your farm, I always go in and I'll cut the south-facing hillside. It'll thicken up 10 times as fast as that north face ever thought about it, just because of how much sunlight hits it.
Makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Did you pay attention at all? And I mean, at least when I'm thinking about ever buying a property, especially in a spot like Michigan where there's a lot of hunting pressure and stuff, one of the most important criteria is the neighborhood. Like trying to buy a farm in an area where there's going to be potentially helpful neighbors, people that might be on the same plan as you. Is that something you think about at all?
I did not.
Just said,
I think about it, but when these pieces come up that I like, it's also part of the challenge. Regardless of neighborhood, I want to try and go in there and succeed and do the things that we've learned over the last 3 decades and see if we can't pull a mature deer out of it, and see what we can do. So far, it's been pretty good, as far as the early pictures. I mean, there's mature bucks on that 120 because I put it under contract early enough that I was able to do a camera survey in December, and I got 11 or 12 different rack bucks in there, so I might have got lucky with the neighborhood, to your point. The other farm is not far from our neighborhood, so it's pretty good. It's about 1.5 miles off, and I've met the neighbors. They're all real nice, but there's 4 or 5 guys on every parcel around there, and they're pounding it during the gun season, so my strategy will probably be more directed around the early part of the season than the latter part of the season. Yep. And probably let that be a bit of a sanctuary during rifle season based on the pressure around it.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I'm always fascinated by the details of the examples. So you've got one of these new farms. You've mentioned like a few core things, some changes. You're going to add food and do some stuff like that. When you're thinking through these stand sites, like I'm really fascinated with when you walk out on a property in July or whenever it is that you're hanging your stands on some of these spots. You're walking out to a spot. What are all the things you're thinking about when you're picking the right tree, when you're choosing that this is the spot instead of this other spot along the field or that other spot along the draw? Can you give us like the detailed thought process you're going through when making those?
Sure. I'm looking for the cover and where I would anticipate they would bed. Then I'm looking at the access into the edge of the safe wind direction. In other words, if I think most of the deer are coming from here, I want all the deer upwind in a perfect world all the time. So I'm always generally on the border of cover right when it meets the opening because they're all coming from here, and then I can put my wind back here and then kill them right in front of me. So I'm looking for where they might bed. I'm looking how I might get there and where that edge of travel should be. So those are the things that I look for.
Okay. I can't remember if we've talked to you about this or not. But a lot of people talk about how bucks might use the wind themselves and trying to be on the edge where they think they're using the wind. And have we talked about with you? I mean, how often do you think about that?
To some degree, but I've looked at them through the years, and I don't see them using the wind a whole heck of a lot, to be honest with you. If you sit there and you watch a deer, I mean, I've seen them do everything in every different wind direction through the years. Some of it will depend on the time of the year, but I think they're more in tune with their environment and where bed is and where food is. They're not going to switch where they're bedding because of the wind direction. Bed is bed and security is security, right? And if the wind's out of the north, they might switch where they bed within the bed, but the bed's still the bed. Security cover is the bed. So travel's going to be determined based on, regardless of wind direction, he's going to go feed. So, I've sat there and watched the same buck come out to the same field from the same draw on every wind direction on the compass. Security is security. So I don't put a lot of bets based on wind direction and how a deer is going to travel based on that wind direction.
Interesting.
I think it is more happenstance, and you view it, but that doesn't mean that he does that all the time.
Right. Yeah, because of wind, you're in a spot to see it, right?
Right.
Yeah. You're hunting there for a reason, but it doesn't mean anything to him.
Right, yeah. If that theory was correct, none of our spots would work, right? Because I'm in there on the most beneficial wind for that food plot, so you would think, well, he would never come there, but they're there, and they're there on days when I can't hunt there because the cameras show that. Mm-hmm. So I don't pay a lot of attention to it. And what about the days where the wind is real light,
Right, yeah. That's a whole nother question.
Yet
I wonder about this a lot.
They move quite well then.
Because I wonder, do you not ever see bucks use certain areas with a certain wind direction? Like, I draw A. If there's a southwest wind, I think I'm going to be able to kill such and such. Do you see that at all ever?
No doubt. They depend on their nose a great deal. So therefore, I think they're doing a lot of what we're doing, right? We're often in the same position that the buck is because he's going to approach that draw on the downwind side of the draw to check out what's in that draw. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it depends on what time of the year. I see them using their nose like a dog much more during the rut when they're looking for that next doe than they do early season or late season when they're just bedding going to food. So some of it will occur during the rut that they won't necessarily do early season and late season.
Makes sense.
Or they'll, if they hear two bucks fighting, they're going to the downwind side. Right, they're going to come in from the downwind side to check out who's doing the fighting, to communicate with their nose.
Makes sense. Is there anything else you're doing at this time of year, over the next few weeks or month leading into the season?
Well, it'll be all about cameras, I'll have probably 80 plus out this fall, so I got to get them all up. That takes a while, and that's a chore in and of itself. Cleaning them all, renumbering them all. I sent off any that might be having a little quirky problem to get them fixed in the off season so that when I get ready to put them all out, I re-batteried them all so they all have a fresh set of batteries, and then you go to the field. So there's a few days prep, before you head out to the field with the cameras. The worst thing you can do is head out there with a bunch of batteries, a bunch of cards, and a bunch of cameras. You better go out there with a bunch of cameras that are numbered, a list of where you're putting those cameras, and be ready with fresh batteries because you don't want to set yourself up for a heartache the first time you check your cameras with batteries from last season. Yeah. Get those batteries out of there, man. Start with fresh batteries.
Is there any other maintenance you do with cameras to keep them in good working order?
Clean them and don't avoid shock. Don't let them bounce. There's a bunch of electronics in there, so always handle them with kit gloves. Handle them like a baby and make sure they're not getting jarred around because that's how you lose your focus. It's how you lose, your infrared and those types of things. So I always handle them with kit gloves. So Jamie at Reconics told me that. He said shock is one of the worst things for a camera.
So when you're out, say August, how late into the summer do you stop hanging new sets, or you know what I mean? When are you ideally? Because you hear a lot of people hanging their set in the summer. Dad tends to want to do his in February, once the season's over and it's cooler out and you don't have to deal with poison ivy and all that stuff.
I do too. I prefer then, but it depends on how much time you have. But if your access is right and you choose a windy day, I always like windy days or rainy days to where, that covers your approach in and out. So I think you could hang it and hunt it the same day. And answer your question, if the access was right and you were quiet about your business, the worst thing you can do though is go in there and bang around and make a bunch of noise.
What about like clearing paths and cutting limbs and all that stuff? You say you do put a new setup and you're wanting to clear your spot to it. I mean, you're going to make some noise in those situations.
I'm really selective about that stuff. Really selective. I'm generally trim a few things for shooting, but if I'm going to do a big trim job, it's either going to be in June or in February. And the best time to trim is June or July. Once everything greens up, then you can go in there and trim it, let them have plenty of time to get used to it.
Yeah. How many stands or blind hunting locations do you think you'll have on those two farms? I'm
two each.
curious. 2 hunting locations per 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I would have assumed more.
Well, if those were the only farms I had to hunt, that would be correct.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of different areas in Iowa and Missouri that I'm hunting. So I went to, in my opinion, the 2 cherries on each farm. But this is our first year, so they're kind of in observatory spots. So we'll tweak and move and start popping up more stands once we get camera surveys and get to watch it. But going in there blind, I'd rather watch it than just guess.
Yeah.
I made 2 good guesses on each, I think.
Can you describe in more detail either one of those? So just up on a hill where you can see a lot or something? Or
coincidentally, one's a big bottom plot on each and one's a big ridge on each. And the bottom plot and both bottom plots take a northeast wind, and both top plots take a south to southwest wind. Okay. Ironically enough, so it's just the way it worked out. So went in, scouted the whole thing, looked at all the trails. Okay, this is our access. Here's a bottom plot. Made it bigger. The one farm was all timber, so I had to carve both plots out. The other farm had a beautiful ridge field. I accented it with another ridge, and then there was a pond there that you couldn't see. It was buried in the cedars. So we ended up going in and dozing out to where we could see around that pond, added clover around the entire pond. We got a big ridge of clover here. We're going to put a big biologic patch over here. So that ridge plot on that 97 should be stupidly good. Like when I looked at it, I was like, holy cow, that good Lord didn't make many of these spots, And both places, the bottom field is nuts. I mean, they're really good bottom field. All these trails all coming together into these bottoms, and we've got safe areas for our wind. But in both of those bottom areas, I'm putting up a muddy bull to try and retain our scent and get it in, because those bottoms are where your scent's going to curl around a little bit. So I'm making sure that I can control that scent a little bit down there.
Is there any? I've always wondered about this because so often, right, we avoid those low spots because of the swirling wind. Have you ever found any certain set of circumstances where you're more likely to be able to get away with that? I mean, like a thermal situation, or I don't know.
I have good luck when you can get a hollow, a long, deep hollow lined up with the direction you want the wind.
Yeah.
That's where you get trouble, is if you try to put your wind where it has to go over a ridge and then go out here. It's not going to work. So I will move. We put that bottom field on that 120 in line with the deepest hollow on the place. And it was kind of where 2 drainages came together. Yep. So the wind can come like this, put it back over the other drainage, and then the food plot, in theory, should be upwind of us. And I wind tested it, and it was good.
Interesting.
Now, I wind tested it with no leaves. I have not wind tested it with leaves. I suspect that could be a problem.
So that's an interesting thing too, to check that early in the year and then in the summer, because those leaves probably do make a difference with how the wind travels.
I guarantee they will.
And you're wanting it for an early season spot potentially.
I'm going to try it, but I suspect I'm going to go in there and get busted. That's my gut, but I know late season the Northeast is going to work because there were no leaves on the trees and it worked. So I wind test a lot, because why not test it? We test everything in life. Why not test it and make sure that the wind's going to be consistent rather than go in there and hunt it, which here I am saying I'm going to go in there and hunt it and probably get blown because I don't want to test it this time of the year. I mean, we're going to – that muddy bull, though, keeps most of those problems out. So what I will do is when I go there, I'm going to go there on a very light wind day when it's really low, because I've got some other northeast spots that work well when the wind's brisk. But when it's real light, it seems to be a little bit more consistent. And down in those bottoms, a 5 to 6 up on top is nearly nothing down in the bottom. Get in that muddy bowl, close the windows, and we'll be okay. That's where I generally go, is to a spot that you might get winded anyway on those really light wind days, because the wind's going to swirl whether you're on top or in the bottom, so you might as well go to a bottom where it swirls all the time anyway. And that's when I have a tendency to close myself in.
Do you have any situations this year? And I mean, you mentioned it earlier that oftentimes on one of your Missouri farms, you're usually having good early season action. Do you have a situation, is there a buck this year that you are keyed in on already for the early season, for the first few days maybe of the year, that you're planning for? Potentially.
We have a deer called Forky the Pig, and he's a big-bodied deer and just a big old G2 with a fork on it, so we called him Forky the Pig.
Nice.
And he's this giant body, and I actually missed him with a rifle last year during the rifle season at about 300 yards, and that deer's just in my mind, and I think he's going to be 7.5 this year, so if we can get a read on him, he'll be the target deer for sure. Nice. Only saw him once all last year, but quite a few pictures.
So can you share with us what that plan is then to get the read on him? Like, how is it just going to be?
Well, luckily he lives in a place where we have a lot of success. He lives where Taylor killed the prairie buck and where I killed that fork G2 buck like 3 years ago on that clover field, and that field's in corn. So he could be in trouble if he's there again.
So it's just a
I
matter
suspect he's in trouble then.
Yeah.
If he's there, he could be in trouble.
So that's a situation where basically where the bedroom is, and there's definitely going to be good food there. So
historically, they bed there. They come to this clover plot stage, and then they go out to this huge field, and that's the way we set it up. That top that is now a clover field, where the prairie buck was killed and where that fork buck was killed. That used to just be a cedar top. We went in and dozed it all off, and we go, oh my goodness, look at all this bedding. They'll stage here, and then here's these huge fields. I love areas like that, to where you have this staging plot leading to a big plot. We call that feed them forward, because where they're going, right? They're all going to the big fields, but you got to try and take advantage of the flow heading to those big fields and kind of make them come through a certain area heading to those fields.
And early enough.
Yeah,
and
that's
always the problem, getting them there before.
Do they bed close?
Yeah.
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 Kind of related to that a little bit, we were talking earlier about just how, at least in many cases, and I see it often where I'm hunting a lot, you have a lot of these summertime bucks that you're watching that, as soon as velvet comes off, September 7th or 4th or whatever it is, some percentage of them relocate to a new range. How often do you see that on your properties?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. You gain a lot of deer.
Different in Missouri than Iowa, right?
Yeah, different in Missouri and Iowa. Those ranges are much bigger in Missouri. Therefore, I have a lot more flow there. Almost two different body styles. The Missouri deer are longer, lankier. They walk more. Average field dress weight there of a 5 or 6 year old deer is probably 180, 190. Up in Iowa, that average field weight dress probably field dress weight is probably 215, 220, just two different body styles. Wow. And it's only 35 miles apart. It's crazy the differences between those two states. So I see a lot of movement in Missouri. Terry does as well. But in Iowa, not nearly as much, but you do gain a lot of deer that time of the year. And that's kind of the magic of great habitat and water and cover and food. You're going to gain more than you're going to lose, in my opinion. If you make your farm the best that it can be, you're going to end up on the positive side of that equation when they start moving around.
Do you think that's because of just back to the two differences and how much they travel or not? Do you think that's at all related to the terrain, like the stuff in the area? Like there's more cover in the area where they travel less cover in the Missouri farm where they travel more?
Summer range is just drastically different for a whitetail than it is during the fall. If you look at the deer you see during the summer, oh my goodness, look, all the beautiful deer out everywhere. Well, they're on food. They're trying to eat as much as they can, and all of a sudden when that velvet comes off, it switches. Their attention switches to those does. Mm-hmm. They go to where they're going to rut, and they get ready for what's coming up, which is the one time they get to do it each year. So it switches. Then they're going into the cover, and they're going in where those does are, and they're getting ready to start marking their spots and whatnot. It's just two different worlds.
Yeah.
That's why we did 13, because of all the light switch events.
Right. It is amazing how quickly things change, and as the testosterone ramps up, everything changes.
Everything changes. But that first part of the season, when does Michigan open?
October 1st.
October 1st, still real good. September 15th through October the 13th, 14th, that's a real good month to be a whitetail hunter. You can get on them, stay on them, catch them on food.
Starts cooling off.
Yeah. It's just like December, but you're not dealing with as many deer and you're not dealing with as many cold fronts. But when you get them, they are magic, man.
Yeah.
That last hour and a half of day is really good that time of the year.
I've got all my fingers and toes crossed for a cold front on October 1st.
Holyfield. Right?
Holyfield.
That's right.
Yeah, I think he's still out there.
I think Holyfield and Hook are both going to die this year.
Man, I hope so.
It may be from EHD, but I think they're both going to die.
Hopefully not EHD. I got my fingers crossed.
Let's hope.
Got a plan in place.
Yeah.
So
God,
sure
if you guys both kill those deer the same day or something, wouldn't that be a podcast? You'd have to do one right then.
That would be awesome.
It'd certainly be exciting for the two of us.
Yeah, at least for the two of us would be really jacked. Everyone else is like, well, about time.
Yeah. All those better hunters out there probably be like, it is about time.
It's been a fun journey, though.
Oh, yeah.
Should we cover anything else, or should we wrap this one up?
I think we wrap it up and save some good info for another podcast.
True. Yeah, I can't help
There's
myself.
not a lot left. So.
Every time we get talking, I'm trying to pull as much as I can. So you're right. We should save it.
Save it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, for
My
joining
pleasure.
us
Thanks
on this
for
one.
having me.
A lot of fun. And thanks, everyone, for watching and for listening. And our quick update, as always, if you'd like to submit a question of your own, Very easy to do. You just need to head over to wiredtohunt.com/100% That's 100 and then %wild, and then subscribe for the audio version over at the Apple Podcast app or Google Play or Stitcher. You'll be able to get all the new episodes right on your phone right when they come out.
As always, you can follow along the video version of this podcast at the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel, and we have all kinds of great content there, more than you could probably go through. I mean, we're starting to populate it with original hunts, with killing it in the kitchen segments with Taylor, with throwbacks, with, we've had great throwbacks with like Jay Gregory and all kinds of stuff. So you're going to want to check it out. Be sure to subscribe to get all the latest and greatest, and as always, you can always follow along at all of the social media channels at Drury Outdoors.
Thank you so much for listening and watching.
Peace.